Hello, my name is TL Goodwin of Goodwin and Maxwell, and today I'd like to show you how I treat my ring photography. Today I'm photographing an opal and sterling silver and fine silver ring that is swaged. I'll get into that later. I'm using ControlMyNikon, and it's being photographed. The ring is being photographed on a glass pane suspended about 2.5 inches off of a black velvet background. I find that black velvet does the best at scattering light. I've used simple black cloth before, but that doesn't do as nice of a job as velvet. Black glass seems to be sort of a magnet for dust. I've also used black construction paper, which hides the dust, but it doesn't give a black color. It's more of a gray. That flash of color that you saw is the color of the photograph. That is actually the representation of the photograph as it was being taken. Now I'm rotating. I like to take 3 or 5 different shots of rings in different positions so that the potential purchaser has a pretty good idea of what the whole overall looks like. Constantly dusting. Whatever dust you don't catch with the brush, or whatever I don't catch with the brush, can be dealt with in the next step in Affinity Photo. I like to photograph the back of the stone on any setting that is transparent or translucent, again with dusting. You can see a big piece of dust there on the immediate right. That can be dealt with when I crop the photo. As for my lighting, I'm using 135 watt equivalent spiral LEDs. They are diffused with paper, with a light paper. Sort of like an onion skin, but not quite. In the upper left hand corner you can see my shutter speed, my aperture, the ISO, and that I'm shooting in RAW. There was the flash. And this is the last position that I take. Another good sized piece of dust there in the middle of the opening in the shadow. Now I move on to Affinity Photo. Here I start by cropping and then move on to cleaning the pictures up using the healing tool. But cropping's first. And then once the piece is cropped, it will be developed. And then you move on to the next piece. Now I use Affinity Photo because I happen to like it. I find that it's better than the alternatives, and the alternatives for me is Photoshop, which is expensive, and then there's GIMP, which is free, but in working with NEF files you have to also use Darktable to get to work with them, and it's actually faster if you just do it in Affinity Photo. And that's one of the reasons why I like it. It's easier to work with than both of the others, I think. Now for Etsy, we crop at 5:4. 5:4 ratio. For Shopify, we do a 1:1. Now, on Etsy, the dimensions that you save are 2500 by 2000, and for Shopify, it's 2048 by 2048. Here you can see that in this photo I accidentally got myself, or the reflection of my shirt, in the metal. I'm going to have to deal with that when I do the editing. You can see I finished developing and I'm moving on to the editing stage, in which I'll have to deal with this problem. The healing tool is great because it samples an area that you select and then reproduces that sample wherever you want it to be. It does it with a little fuzzily, or with a bit of fuzz, so it's not like a perfect replacement, but an average. And it does a really good job, as you can see. I mostly just get rid of dust. I don't generally get rid of scratches or imperfections and gemstones. I want you to know what you're getting. Sometimes a small scratch here and there. But still, overall, you're going to see that the work is handcrafted, for sure. I have kind of a strange philosophy about metal. I don't want to overly finish anything, because if I do that and you wear the piece, you're going to remove the finish. If I slightly underfinish, then you're going to wear your own particular finish on. So my silverwork should, in effect, look better over time. So as I said, I'm mostly just cleaning up dust, and myself, whenever I enter into the picture. The ring shank was swaged, which is to say the metal was driven into a design that I cut into a section of railroad rail using a hacksaw and files. This gives it the contour that I want. The bezel is done in fine silver, and the opal is from Coober, Australia. It does have a small fracture running the length of the long side. However, it has been dry for well over 20 years, like 20-something years. And I evidently cut it with the fracture and didn't realize it until I had already set this stone, which I did just a couple of days ago from the filming of this piece. This is the front shot, and I consider it to be the most important shot because it's the one that shows the color of the stone most prominently. Photographing an opal is not always an easy process because of the way in which the opal is formed. The stone has a gray body, so its fire is quite pronounced. Swaging, in effect, is the opposite of stamping. In stamping, you take a stamping tool that is cut to your specification, which I do, and then it is driven into the metal by use of a hammer. In this case, it's the opposite. The design is cut into the metal and the metal is driven in with a hammer. I use a 3-pound sledge to do my work, and I'm one of the few people that I know of. I mean, I don't think anybody else is swaging, though it is an older practice. If you actually look at some Native American photographs or some photographs of Native American jewelers from the 1800s, you'll see that they're using a railroad rail as an anvil in most cases. And at the back of the railroad rail are these grooves that are cut in. And this was for forming wire. Few people do this today. I am aware of a gentleman in England who swages his bracelets and sometimes his rings, but most of the time when designs like this are made, they are either cast or they are rolled out with a roller by passing the metal through a roller at a series of different settings. annealing the metal when necessary. We don't own a roller, so I find that this is perfect for me. It's been a nice improvisation. It's cheaper than buying a roller and then having custom rollers made, that's for sure. And this way I'm much more flexible. If there's a design I need for a ring shank or a ring, I can make it myself. I've been making my own stamping tools since basically I started doing the jewelry, which was in 1994. I'd actually started earlier, but this is when I became very serious about the subject. It was then I decided it would be my art. I was seduced by gem material into metalworking, and metalworking became just as important, if not more important, than gem cutting. But gem cutting is the reason why I started, and I will not use anybody else's stones, only stones I cut myself, unless it's a custom order in which somebody needs a particular stone for a particular reason, like for an engagement ring. I am a full-service lapidary, which is to say that I not only cut cabochons, but I also facet and make gemstone beads. Though I don't make gemstone beads all that often. I don't often cut opal anymore. I don't really trust it. And at this point, I'll probably never buy opal rough again. And it's not just that I don't trust the stone itself, but I also don't trust, generally, the people buying them. When I first started, I knew a man who sold really wonderful material. I lost him quite a long time ago. I no longer know anything of where he is or if he's even around, but at the time he had the best stuff imported from Cooper Pedy. This came from that material at least 23 years ago. So we continue on with the cleaning. This is the last photo. As I said, I enjoy Affinity Photo's workflow, and coming up is another reason why I like Affinity Photo. It's how you can specify size when you go to export. In GIMP, you actually have to resize the photograph before you go to save it to the size that you want, and then save it. One quick note about my camera. I'm using a Nikon D5100 with the lens that came with it, which is the 1855. It's an extremely common lens, and when I photograph rings, I use a 12mm extension ring. ControlMyNikon not only allows me to see the photograph on the monitor before I actually take it, but it allows me to tether the camera to my keyboard, so I just have to press a button and that activates the shutter. I use a Nikon, but if you use a Canon, there's similar software available for your use. Now you can see I'm saving these photographs at the correct size, or the size that I want. Automatically does the calculation. Here I have to change it to an E because I have it photograph set up in ControlMyNikon as recording under S for Shopify, but these are headed toward Etsy, so they're being identified as an E in the prefix. Overall, the process is pretty fast. To come up with this video, I'm using both OBS and DaVinci Resolve. Both are stellar. Not only that, they're free. If you have enjoyed the background music was provided by Blind Congress. I am Blind Congress. And my music is found on most major outlets, including Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, Bandcamp, and many more. If you can, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and if you feel like lending your support, you can do so through Patreon, or by purchasing something from buy.goodwinandmaxwell.com or Goodwin and Maxwell at Etsy. You can check out our other work. Heather makes wonderful beads out of recycled glass that she links together into bracelets, earrings, and necklaces. Goodwin and Maxwell is kind of unusual in that we create all of our own components by hand. As I said, I do all my own lapidary work, but it just doesn't stop there. All of the beads we use are handmade by Heather Maxwell. She also does all of our wire work, including the ear wire and link work. She also designs many of the pieces using my components or components that I provide for her. I also make most of my own tools for stamping, swaging, repoussé, and chasing. Thank you.